Hi everyone, Hare Krishna, and thank you for joining today and taking the time to be here. I just want to say a few things about about Ramapada Swami, who's our guest speaker. So Swamiji is a motivational speaker and a Bhakti yoga teacher who has spoken at many Fortune 500 companies, including Microsoft and Intel, and various universities, including MIT and Northwestern. And he has traveled the entire world to teach Bhakti Yoga. Beyond that, I've been lucky to have known him since I was very young. And throughout all of my experiences, I have realized that Maharaj is very, very personable and he's very open and easy to talk to. Um, and he's also a very deep thinker because he presents thousands of year old ideas from the Vedas in a way that's just so applicable to our personal lives, which you'll see in this presentation today. So without further ado, I'll hand off the Zoom to Rampad Swami. But I just want to thank you all again for joining us for an enlightening evening to learn about stress management, meet a monk, and chat about philosophy. There you go.
Okay. Welcome. Sorry that we couldn't be face to face, but things happen beyond our control, and that sometimes can cause stress. I'm okay though. So let's begin. There's two parts: stress management, and then the second part is a spiritual approach. Because stress management is something that people of this world deal with and talk about and have professions to deal with it. So I'm going to touch on some of those things first. And then the second will go to the spiritual approach side. And you see the subtopic is finding real satisfaction, and that's the spiritual approach. Real satisfaction enables one to handle anything, according to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and according to practical experience of people who live by those teachings. Another title, this is taken from somebody that I know that professionally they deal with stress management. So their title is From Trauma to Transcendence. Or there's many material problems, but it's certainly possible to make spiritual solutions to those problems. A recommendation, I'm going to go quickly at the beginning. I hope that's okay. To get the most of what we're going to do when we spend time together, there's, generally speaking, you probably do this in school, you may do this in school, but especially something that's on the social, emotional side of life, it helps to do these two things. You're going to hear some things that may resonate with you and seem meaningful to you. So sharing with another person, that will help assimilate what you've heard. And the second thing is you may decide there's a certain area of improvement that you want to work on. And in a confidential way, you share with a friend, this is something I'm going to work on. And you can then naturally request them to support you and remind you, and you can share with them going forward in time. So these two things, expressing and commitment to improve in certain areas, stress management areas in particular. Here's a standard curve. You may have seen it before, a bell curve. And along the horizontal line is as stress increases, and the vertical line is performance increasing. So there's a thing that's called eustress or good stress, because when there's a little stress or manageable stress, it increases your performance. And as your performance is increasing, attention is increasing, interest in what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it increases. So that's good. There's the eustress or good stress. And then there's the other kind. Performance decreases as you go forward, as stress increases. So that's the toxic stress. So you'll see this chart one more time. So let's do the good one, the healthy stress. It's sometimes called eustress. It helps you become motivated. It's good in life that there's challenges that you have to stretch a little bit to meet. That's good. And hopefulness that you're going to meet it. That's also good. You have to pay attention to details in order to do those things. That's good. And it's invigorating. So a classic example of this is a celebrated man. You may never have heard his name. His name is George de Menstrual. So George de Menstrual, George de Menstrual lived in Italy, tell by his name. And one day he was going out for a walk with his dog, and his dog was running around here and there. His dog ran into a bunch of burrs, and those burrs clung to the feathers, the fur of his dog, and that could have been a very stressful situation. But he was a curious man. And so, along with carefully removing the burrs, he looked under a magnifying glass what the burrs were made up of, and a light went on, and he thought of a nice way to use that system, and he created a product that's well known in the world called Velcro. So George de Menstrual created a lot of money for himself, wealth for himself, and a name for himself, despite a stressful situation of burrs in the fur of his dog. So it can be good. Stressful situations can be good. And there's stressful situations or the experience of stress that's not good. Performance goes down, et cetera, et cetera. A general principle of this toxic stress is not being in the present. There's the future, and one is planning too much and worrying too much about the future. What might happen if? And then if the mind goes to the past, it's gone. You can't do anything about the past, but what if? And this is a classic way from people that deal with stress professionally. The mind snowballs. That is to say, something that's small becomes big, big becomes bigger, bigger becomes overwhelming, and before you know it, it's what they call the avalanche effect. And avalanche is really simple. It's here's what avalanches start. A little bit of snow. There's snow on a mountainside, and then there's some light snow on top of the snow. And some light snow at the top starts to tumble. And when that light snow at the top starts to tumble, the light snow knocks other snow further down the mountain, and it gathers momentum, and before you know it, it's lethal. Avalanches are deadly. So expanding the scope of something beyond what it really is it's a producer of toxic stress. And there's effects of toxic stress. Here's a list on the left. And there's another one, there's space on the right, there's more bad effects. One can find it difficult to sleep. Or over a period of time, health becomes debilitated. One becomes unnecessarily nerve sensitive. It can break relationships. Balanced life can become unbalanced. And there's something that happens when it gets really bad. There's an urgency, something to replace that sense of stress, urgency addiction. And those are things like bad habits of drinking or drugs, illicit relations, and in the other softer ones, reducing positivity and envy and jealousy. So toxic stress is bad stuff. So we want to stay away from that. So what are some of the things to do to stay away from that toxic stress? Just on the material side, there's a little graphic where someone is in one position trying to get to another position. And it's a little graphic meant to illustrate something that was taught by Viktor Frankl. And some of you may know who Viktor Frankl is. I found a lot of people know who Viktor Frankl is. He wrote a book in 1946. It's been reprinted something like 19 times because it's really powerful. And it's also a really skinny book. And it's full of meaning. In the title, it's Man's Search for Meaning. He's a Jewish man who was in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. And obviously he survived. And after he came out, he wrote this book because while he was planning in his mind that the subject matter of the book that saved him. And here's there's 3 slides that have, amongst many very powerful statements in this book. Here's one. What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but whether the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him or her, of course. And in his case, he was by profession, before and after World War II, he was a psychiatrist. So his calling, his goal worthy of him, was to be able to help people who are caught in circumstances of life. There's nothing they can do about the circumstances, and to maintain their equilibrium through those very stressful situations. I mean, most likely, most of us are not going to be in life and death situations and torture in between during our lifetime. It may happen, but not so likely. But that's what he was going through. There's details in the book, which I won't go into. So he was meditating and meditating and meditating. I want to be in a position after all this is over to be able to help people who are caught, or at least feel caught by circumstances. Nothing they can do about those circumstances. So what to do. And that give this mission, or something worth struggling and striving for, that's the positive energy part of life. And take shelter there rather than taking shelter. I've got to get rid of this stress producing thing. Here's a nice photograph of Viktor Frankl. There's photographs when he's a little older too. And same book, here's something similar on the topic of stress. Everything can be taken from a man, but the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's own way. This is a powerful principle in stress management. Something that the circumstances that are stressful, you may or may not be able to do something about the circumstances. But the circumstance can't take away one thing. Other things may be taken away, but there's a freedom. I had a nice discussion with somebody about, freedom is a big word for me. And I realize, it's important, but how much freedom do I really have? Anyways, so the freedom of choice is an important freedom in stress management. And the choose your way, choose your attitude, because that's a power that's within your control. And one more, again, Viktor Frankl, This is an attitude towards life stress creating adversity. Nice. It's a picture of a Buddhist person sitting there doing his meditation. There's also purpose in life, which is almost barren of both creation and enjoyment, and which admits of but one possibility of high moral behavior, namely in man's attitude to his existence, an existence restricted by external forces. So this is positive, and it's powerful in dealing with stressful situations and the stress that you're experiencing in those stressful situations. Even as his words, almost barren of both creation and enjoyment. So it's possible. He lived it. And there's some very nice teachings along the same line. I'm going to narrate quickly the farmer's story. I heard this farmer's story many times, and I've shared it many times. And it goes like this. It's along the similar lines. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer. And the people in the village came to the Chinese farmer and said to the Chinese farmer, "Oh, you're so fortunate. You have a horse. And because you have a horse, you can plow your fields much more easily than we can. Such good fortune." And the Chinese farmer replied, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" He was a Taoist. After some time, the horse ran away. The people in the village came to the farmer and said, "Oh, what misfortune, your horse ran away. Now you have to plow your fields like the rest of us." And he replied, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" He wasn't stressed out. Some time passed, the horse came back. Not only the horse came back with many other horses, wild horses. And the villagers came to the farmer and said, "Oh, what good fortune. Not only you have your horse back, but now you have many, many more horses." And the farmer said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" In the course of his son trying to train the horses to break in the wild horses so they could plow the field, he fell off the horse, broke his leg. Oh, so the villagers came to the farmer, "What misfortune, your son broke his leg trying to train those wild horses." And the farmer said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" After some time, China declared war. Some other country or whatever it was. And so there was a law passed that all able-bodied men between this age, that age, had to join the army. And so when the army recruiters came to town, all the young men were taken off to the war, except his son, because he had a broken leg. So the villagers went to the Chinese farmer and said, "Oh, what good fortune. Your son didn't have to go to the war because he's got a broken leg." And guess what the farmer said? "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" So a lot of the circumstances of life that may look like either good or ill fortune have a lot to do with the perception of what that thing is and how is it advantageous and not advantageous. And if you're not just a Taoist, but if you're back to the title point, if you're finding a deeper satisfaction within, or like Viktor Frankl, there's a mission and purpose of your life that's higher than the temporary, then you have strength and you can handle the stress of misfortune much, much better. Now back to our topic. These are just on worldly sides of dealing with stress. So one of the manifestations of stress is worrying. This is, the future part. And the future may this, may that, and you fantasize trouble and you feel some stress. And sometimes it can become toxic stress, depending. There's a nice statement by Mark Twain. I've had a great deal of catastrophes in my life, but luckily most of them never happened. Worrying is a feature of the avalanche effect if it gets out of control. And so there are recommendations from people that work with stress management in their professional capacity. Here's one. We're going to see some other ones. Experience. Don't run away from it. Don't tuck it under the rug. Don't deny it. There it is. You experience it. And as you're experiencing it, you don't let your mind just stay stuck. Rather, you contemplate something that for you is energizing, and it involves your senses, or there's some activity, whatever that something is, and you do some of that something, and you feel energized. And as you're feeling energized, you're feeling the calming effect, and whatever that thing is that was the worrying source, you feel some relief, some calming, and then you can move on with your life, with whatever it is that was the cause of your worry. Saying the same thing in a slightly different way. Sometimes life throws rocks at us. And when life throws rocks at you, it hurts. But you can't change it because the life threw rocks at you, and it can't change it, and you can't reverse it. Now here's cyclical stress. Is you get into retaliation mode. You pick up the rock and you can beat yourselves with it or throw it back at the person and dwell and complain and put yourself down. I'm bad, and that's why this happened, or something, or the other person's bad, and that's why this happened. And it doesn't help the negative emotion, the stress. Rather, especially if you beat yourself up, now you feel more pain, more anxiety, more depression. It can work the other way. You can become a bully. I'm not going to let this happen to me again, and go after other people and be another kind of stress. And if it's the beating yourself up thing, then it's easy to pick up some bad habits, like we spoke about before. And that make things worse. Then there's some guilt and pain and anxiety and stress. This is from the people that deal with stress professionally, and there's a cycle to it. The avalanche gets bigger even. So there's a way to break the cycle, and starts the same two ways in the beginning. Life throws rocks. It hurts. You can't change it. Now here's what's recommended. The stress management guides or counselors. Take the rock, toss it in the air a few times, and you think about what are your options. You go into, in other words, you go into a reflective space. You don't deny the rock or the hurt, but there's the rock, that's the stress itself, and you toss it in the air. What are your options? And then based upon what your options are in this reflective, your intelligence becomes stronger when you become reflective than when you become reactive. When you become reactive, your intelligence becomes shorter. When you become reflective, your intelligence becomes broader. And then in that broader intelligence, you can consider something that's within your control that you can do about the rock or where the rock came from. And you feel empowerment rather than disempowerment. The recommendation is don't go into denial mode, that it never happened, it's meaningless, when in fact it hurts. And don't think that the rock, that means the stress itself, has to be dealt with immediately. These are all mode of goodness principles for those of you that like Bhagavad Gita, but they don't say Bhagavad Gita verses, they just speak of practical things to do. So that was dealing about worrying and the stress that come from worrying about something that hurt. Here's another sequence. Voice your frustration. Not you don't have to scream, but in some manner or another that's appropriate for the circumstance. You feel frustrated, you say it. And then take a deep breath. This is recommended. Do a little pranayama. Take some deep breaths. And what happens when you take deep breaths in pranayama, your autonomic nervous system gets cooled out. And then when your autonomic nervous system gets cooled out, you can contemplate more clearly. And then again, you consider options that are within your ability. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I'm going quickly because of our time constraints. There's some discussion here about the autonomic nervous system. And there's some nice, medical language here where the autonomic nervous system deals with your heartbeat, your blood pressure, the eyes dilating or constricting, and, organs within the body that are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And there's, generally speaking, two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. There's the fight or flight, and there's the rest and digest. In either case, we don't have to think about it. The fight or flight happens, the rest and digest happens. Just two parts of the same nervous system. Here's a chart that says the same thing. There's the nervous system at the top, and they have a nice name, peripheral nervous system. And a subset of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic nervous system. And then there's the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So you don't have to learn all this technical term, but it has some application to stress management. The autonomic nervous system regulates these things: heartbeat, your stomach, your digestive system, your eyes, your blood flow system, and the skin, and your glands, various glands, just to list them all. And here's a nice medical chart on the left. So this is the sympathetic nervous system, and this is the fight or flight one. So, the example, it's a nice sunny day. You go for a walk in the park. Suddenly a big bear comes in your path. What are you going to do? Fight or flight. Fight or flight. And you don't have to think about it. It just happens. That's the sympathetic. And when that sympathetic nervous system kicks in, then all of the things that ramp up your nervous system happen automatically. You don't have to tell them, okay, guys, get ramped up. It just happens. And it's a good idea to spend a little more time, not too much, but some time in the parasympathetic nervous system. And same scene, you relax in a comfortable chair out in the park, and you brought a nice Bhagavad Gita with you, and you do some meditation or something, and the parasympathetic nervous system becomes strengthened. So it's good for stress management to spend some regular time with the parasympathetic nervous system. And here's a detailed chart, which I don't need to go into, but there's what happens with the eyes, the glands, the nose, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, everything, the adrenal system, when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and when the parasympathetic nervous system is opulating, when it's stimulated. So in short, meditation, contemplative life, some part of your day, not just, on weekends, some part of your day, spend time with this parasympathetic nervous system, and you'll find stress management will be more within your grip, generally speaking. Studies have been done about this. This is Herbert Benson, celebrated person from Harvard Medical School. He spent several decades on this topic. And this is an article from a science journal. Just speaking something, popular magazine. Meditation helps in the parasympathetic nervous system, which ends up in the mind that's more calm. And when your mind is more calm, you can handle unexpected, sudden, or even sustained kinds of stress, like your academic year at Cornell, that, it's exam after exam after exam and pressure after pressure after pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Meditation will help you, according to Herbert Benson, and studies that are on this topic. There's a number of reports that he did. Here, I'm going to summarize because of time. He was testing TM primarily, transcendental meditation, and he found there were certain physiological benefits for people who were engaged in a regular basis in meditation. Heartbeat and breath rates slowed down, calm. Oxygen consumption fell. Blood lactate levels dropped. The electric response, a sign of relaxation of the skin, diminished, and so forth. The brain waves indicated a sign of relaxation. Alpha activity increased. And then he found, and just doing this quickly, there are certain key elements that help. Go to a place where it's relatively quiet and clean. Something that's you use as a method. He put it a device, a mental device that can remind you. So mantra meditation is one of those, just in clinical terms. And you sit in a comfortable position and your attitude is receptive. And his findings are at the bottom. It's good for stress management, in short. Again, I'm going quickly because of time. Here's a little statement in a popular journal. Research at Harvard suggests that the deep sense of calm we can achieve through yoga, prayer, or simple deep breathing exercises can help counter the effects of chronic stress. I have an iPhone, and my iPhone is connected with my iPhone. There's an iWatch. And every now and then the iWatch blips and prompts me, breathe deeply. Like, as if I need a reminder to, de-stress. So because it found that pranayama helps relieve distress. It's certainly temporarily, but you become practiced at yoga and meditation and its corollary activities. And overall, stress becomes far more manageable. Similar studies, Duke University found that religious observance is associated with lower rates of illness and hospitalization. Similarly, researchers are gaining unprecedented insights into the mind's power to heal. It goes the other way. The mind has the power to debilitate health, but mind has the power to keep you in good health. So your orientation of the mind through meditation is a big deal in helping you to do stress. Now you may say, gosh, I don't have time because I have so much work. When your capacity to work will improve both qualitatively and quantitatively, and it'll take you less time if you're focused internally as opposed to filled and more filled with stress. In other words, my dear friends, please take seriously the opportunity to take a spiritual solution to the material problem of stress. Here's Henry David Thoreau. With all your science, can you tell me how it is that light comes into the soul? say it the other way, how light comes from the soul. Light doesn't go into the soul, light comes from the soul. And that illumination is when you're spiritually awake, then light goes into your life. Same series of articles. An estimated 60 to 90% of doctor visits involve stress-related complaints. So I hope you're not visiting doctors, but you want to perform nicely. You're at Cornell because you can. You've already demonstrated you can, and continue to do so, despite more stress than you experienced before you went to Cornell. And then what happens after you graduate from Cornell? It's not going to, the curve doesn't go down. So get on top of it, please, and understand some principles. We're going to touch some more principles. Now we're going a little bit more in the spiritual direction. Here's a Japanese researcher, Dr. Emoto, that found thoughts affect physical reality, thoughts and feelings. So one of the things he did with his team of researchers, he had them take some water and feel and express in words different messages like love and gratitude. They freeze the water. And when the water thaws, they take a picture of the crystal. And that's what love and gratitude crystal looks like. And on the other side, you make me sick, what it looks like. So that's just mind and some sound. And then sometimes when you have this negative feeling, negative emotion, it's good to let it go. Retaliation or revenge doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. Here's a practical one. One time I was speaking at Fannie Mae. It's in Washington, D.C., and they deal with real estate and, property purchases and sales and things like that. And I spoke about I showed the same material to them, and they applied this one because I had some cookies afterwards. They didn't want cookies because there was sugar in the cookies. So it doesn't have to be something extreme, but apply some of this. Apply some of this. If I had more time, I would elaborate on all of these things, but I don't have more time. Health, the body can heal and the body can harm itself. So live a lifestyle that's in the mode of goodness, because the body will live longer and your ability to handle stress will be better. Doesn't mean don't be productive. It just means see what those qualities, you'll find them in Bhagavad Gita, several places. Chapter 18 is a nice place. The qualities of the mode of goodness, and abide by them. And in this series, there's this nice study that was done by some neurologists. I'll just mention briefly what this illustration is showing. A neurologist had an idea. I wonder if not just the emotions, but even the hardware of the brain will change over time through meditation. Not just the software, but the hardware. And so they did a study, and the study showed that, in fact, the neurology of the brain in those who practice meditation in a serious way over some period of time, the hardware changes. It alters the structure and the functioning of the brain. So now we're going to go to the spiritual side. There's a nice painting of Krishna and Arjuna, so you know what that means. This is some Bhagavad Gita message. And in Bhagavad Gita, we hear there are spiritual solutions. Here's a Bhagavad Gita verse, chapter 6. Krishna said, "Oh, mighty armed son of Kunti," that's Arjuna, "it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind. but it is possible by suitable practice and detachment. So it's not just when you have stress, it's good to have a lifestyle that has a practice involved that teaches to connect with who you really are and all these nice things we heard from the nervous system, the whole benefits that go to the physical, the body into the mind. And then the restless mind can become steadied, but it requires deliberate practice, and the mind can then be brought under control. Another Bhagavad Gita verse. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Now that's high, attaining the Supreme. We're just speaking about stress management. But when you aim for a spiritual objective, a little bit like Viktor Frankl, it's a worthy goal to strive for, to know who you are and know what your relationship with the Supreme is. That's a worthy goal. And if you move in that direction, then there's a happiness that comes. If you remember from the second slide, the higher happiness, the greater happiness, the satisfaction within enables one to deal with anything. You'll find this in chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. What's trauma? Trauma is like an extreme degree of stress. What do the Vedas say about trauma? Trauma or stress is that experience which makes us think and experience ourselves as anything different from who we really are. So who are we really? Anyways, and from Bhagavad Gita, it tells us we're spirit soul. And as long as we're not identifying with who we are, but we identify with something that we're not, that's a recipe for feeling stress or in an extreme degree in trauma. So spiritual solution is, my dear friends, try to move in the direction of learning who you are in the deepest sense, in the spiritual sense, that we're identity as a soul and we're meant as part of this whole complex world in which we live to have some harmonizing effect within the world in which we live. This is our original position. Say same thing in a different way. Whatever are the qualities of gold in a gold mine, that a particle of gold that comes from the gold mine has the same quality. It's gold, golden, although maybe tiny. The particle of gold is the same quality as the gold in the gold mine. Same. The quality of the Supreme, whatever that is within us because we're part of that Supreme. And this position of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, that's who the Supreme is, and we're part of the Supreme. So it's our nature. So how to be stress-free when you're in a stressful circumstance of life? It's an atmosphere that's not who you are. Strive to remain fixed in the understanding of who you are, or at least the process of self-realization, the process of awakening higher consciousness. You're in good position to deal with stress better than the person who's not going in that direction in their life. Almost done. Here's a statement from Srimad Bhagavatam. We're moving on from Bhagavad Gita to Srimad Bhagavatam. And you see in the last line of the Sanskrit, Atma Suprasidati. Prasanna means happiness. Suprasanna means great happiness. And Atma Suprasanna means within the self, within the soul itself, feeling great happiness. And that's this satisfaction within. And the satisfaction within comes as a result from the earlier parts of the verse, from bhakti unto adhoksaja, the Supreme. And this contentment, it happens, it causelessly, ahaitoki, it causelessly arises. In other words, saying the same thing in a different way, contentment is already our nature. The wholesome stress, that's also part of our nature, but the toxic stress is not part of our nature. So how do you deal with the toxic stress? Go back to who you really are. And then when you're feeling the sense of connectedness with who you really are, you can move through the world, which is who you aren't, and in a seamless way, in a very productive way, very compatible way. And there's situations that are unpleasant, sure, but you can address them far more effectively if your consciousness is directed toward the Supreme. That's bhakti. I think I'm just going to take one more verse from this one, is from the Upanishads. This is the first verse of Isha Upanishad, where it says, if you work, rather than giving you the meaning of the Sanskrit phrase, Isha means the Supreme or the controller. And if you live your life in connectedness with the Supreme, then you accept those things that are meant for you by the Supreme, your necessities, and you accept them gratefully, and you engage them in the service to the Supreme gratefully with a nice heart, and you don't accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. And one who lives their life that way, they're very peaceful. And it's the formula for realizing who we are, realizing the Supreme. And last but not least, there's this Hare Krishna mantra that we regularly chant. I don't know if any of you or all of you or some of you probably are regularly chanting, but I encourage you to learn. Maybe when we're together tomorrow, we can spend some time with this mantra meditation. And by mantra meditation, that centeredness on who you are and who is the Supreme and your relationship can grow, and stress management is accomplished better. And I'll just a little sharing on this one. A few years ago, I was in college like you are. A little more than 50 years ago, I was in college. And I was in pre-med. And it had its challenges academically. And during that period of time, for different reasons, I started exploring, seeking answers to questions that academics didn't give me. And I started chanting, among other things I was doing. And I heard from somebody, it's nice that you're chanting. Consider chanting 16 rounds on your beads every day. Like, gosh, that's not possible because I have all this work. And there wasn't pressure from anybody. It's just like there was an encouragement. If you can, it's great. So I thought, look, let me try. So I tried. And I found that to chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna mantra, it took me 2 hours. But when I started chanting 16 rounds and it took me 2 hours, that's 2 hours less of academic study time. But I found that without even trying to do so, I was so much energized from chanting that my sleeping was reduced by 2 hours. Went from 8 to 6 hours. And since I was energized from those 2 hours of chanting, my academic work went so swiftly, it was like soft butter in a knife. So my academic work took less time, and then I had some time for reading Bhagavad Gita. But just from that commitment to mantra meditation in a committed way, there was some nice reciprocation that happened. So I don't know about all of you, but I recommend something. And the last slide is this one. This is my spiritual master, our founder, Acharya of ISKCON, and he has a very contented smile, and there's a reason. And his contentedness was trying to give this knowledge and way of life to persons who he knew needed it, and some of us wanted it, and some of us were willing to accept it. And those who are willing to accept it, the contentment that we found was something that made him very pleased. So I hope you all can become a little pleased. If there's something that you've heard, you can share with others. There's something that you've heard that you think you'd like to make a commitment to, share that with a friend and try to apply it. And that will help you get the most out of the time we just spent together. Close to an hour. So let's see if there's some discussion. So I don't know how we're going to do this. If those of you that are watching or viewing or listening, you can raise a question, unmute yourself, or whatever it is. There we go. I'm very patient. I can sit here for a while until somebody wants to unmute themselves and participate. Shivani. Hi.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm joining from Atlanta. I actually met you a couple, like 2.5 weeks ago with my dad, Ajit Krishna. So super excited to see you again. My sister Radhika is also on. But I had a quick question. Something interesting. So I thought this was a really helpful topic. I've definitely related to this, going through college, getting into the workplace, etc. And I feel like I'm now at a stage, in my mid 20s where a lot of, I've seen a lot of like the quarter life crisis is kind of a theme amongst like a lot of friends and coworkers and stuff. And I know a lot of these things, a lot of these points you discussed are particularly applicable to that. But do you have any advice specifically for, relating this to people who have like less of a background in bhakti or who are a bit newer?
Well, just as for example, when I went to Fannie Mae, there were people from all different backgrounds. I would say 90% of them, there was a good attendance. They didn't know anything about Bhagavad Gita and bhakti and everything. So, there's some things that they can do. How to help persons depends on the person, but things that they can do that can help them. And, a starting point, for example, a starting point is the food choices. And food choices have a big impact on the quality of the modes of nature. So if people can move, depends on the person you're speaking to, but make food choices that are in the category of goodness. And that's going to have a big impact on the modes of nature and how they're feeling about life because of the modes of nature. Or you can speak about how they talk to one another. And if you like, depending upon the person, you can refer them to 715 Bhagavad Gita. So that's like you put your finger on that page in the book and you say to them what it says and then show them in the book what it says and say, this is a quality of goodness. Speech that's nonviolent, that doesn't bring harm to others, doesn't inflict discomfort to others. Try to live your life that way. And, I don't know, most people aren't going to shake their head and say, no, that's not a good way to live. You got to be strong and you got to say harsh things. So it doesn't say you can't be strong, but say in such a way that it's uplifting and beneficial. So, and then you, in other words, what I'm pointing to is you can shoehorn them into the message of Bhagavad Gita so that they feel some comfort. There's maybe something applicable in my life to the message of Bhagavad Gita to help me, whatever they want. If you like, in fact, I'll send to you, and I'll send to you and Maha a little PDF that I circulated yesterday evening at a yoga studio in Buffalo. And the PDF is hyperlinked, and it takes you to the exact Veda-based place where dealing with negative emotions are addressed in Bhagavad Gita. And there's a whole page full of them. It's in other words, it's very practical wisdom, depending upon the person, that, they're interested in practical stuff, not just like this fluffy, religious stuff. They want some practical stuff. So it's practical stuff. Although the framework is Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's not just fluffy stuff. It's not just religious, beliefs and stuff like that. So depends on the person, how you can help them. And one of the best ways you can help another person is be a good example of what a good person is. Be an example of a Vaishnava by quality and by character. That's very strong.
I think that would be really, really helpful, because I know these principles would be, really helpful to a lot of friends and, people that I know. But I like, how you said that PDF, it's just very practical. I think having it start from a practical place, I think that would be really, really helpful. Can I drop my email in the chat, or?
No, I just send it to you on WhatsApp.
Oh, yep, of course.
And send one to Maha, and she can circulate it however you guys do your thing.
Oh, perfect. No, that would be really, really helpful. Thanks, Maharaj.
While we're speaking, you send me a little note. I don't think I'll forget, but you send me a little note, because then I won't forget to send it to you. Send me the PDF, Maharaj.
All right.
Okay, and then I'll
do that right now.
Make it available to others. Okay.
Perfect.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you, Haribol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I had a question, or had a few comments. I really liked the quote you shared by Mark Twain. When I look at my life, there are many things that I worried about, and luckily none of them ever happened. And you're right that I suffer more in my mind than I actually do in real life. So thank you for that. But I had a couple of questions. What I notice about myself is I sort of operate at extremes. Like, I'm either overly optimistic or I'm overly pessimistic, and it's really difficult for me to have like healthy, realistic expectations about the future. What is something that I can do to, not operate at these extremes, but just operate in a more reasonable way when it comes to thinking about the future or planning for the future?
I'll give two answers, and I see Shreya, and as soon as we're done, we're going to call on Shreya. Mindfulness. And mindfulness has its place in Buddhism. Mindfulness has its place in Bhakti. And mindfulness means be in the moment, as opposed to the fantasizing of the future, planning the future, or lamenting over the past. So you don't go into the passion or the ignorance thing, you stay in the goodness thing. And that goodness space, one of the best ways, Abhinav, one of the best ways to practice being in the moment is japa. Put your hand in the bead bag and start to say the mantra and see where your mind goes. If your mind goes to the mantra, then you're practicing mindfulness. And when you're practicing mindfulness, you can curb the restless mind that wants to go into those other modes. Or say it the other way. Supposing you just mouth the mantra and you're not mindful of the sound, then you're going to get carried away by those two pendulum things. A second is a principle that I understood from Bhaktivinoda Thakur and I've tried to live by. And that is, I'll say it real slowly, progress is a series of small steps in the right direction. So be realistic about what the right direction is. Be realistic about what you can sustain and maintain. Like somebody wrote to me recently about how to become steady, because they said it differently than you said it, but they're unsteady. So steady means the impurities of the heart have become reduced. You know, the phrase in Sanskrit is nishtha, or steady, but steadiness comes when the impurities or anarthas in the heart are removed. And that takes some time. So now be realistic for yourself of what are some of the steps you can take, doable, sustainable steps. And that's progress. Towards what? Towards a goal. So be clear what the goal is. Not, it can be far away goal. That's okay. You may have some intermediate goals. That's okay. But take steps that are sustainable and doable for you. And that's progress. So you put those two together. Now, that's easier said than done, because there's a tendency, and tendencies have a way of repeating themselves. So, the extremism is a tendency. You can counter the tendency by something that's wholesome and holistic. You can take little steps. And after you take a little step and you do the little step and you sustain it, you have a little party, you celebrate, yay. And then you go on to the next, what's the next little step? And avoid the compulsion or obsession to make a real big one. Just do little ones. Series of little ones, in as long as you know you're aligned with that goal. Prabhupada said the same thing in a different way. I like both. I like Bhaktivinoda Thakur's way of saying it. Prabhupada said, when the goal is well defined, it's very easy to take steps to reach the goal. So make sure your goal is well defined, not something that you just concoct, something that's is from our spiritual authorities, and they're the persons who are wise and well-wishers, and then you hold their hand, and with the acceptance of that's the goal for me. I resonate with it, and then little steps. It can be in terms. I'm saying in terms of spiritual, but can also be material. Like, whatever your career goal might be, someone else's, whatever their career goal is, that's a goal. And you take little steps to reach the goal. And it may take some years. It's about a week. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, I was in Phoenix. And I met somebody that was an Indian lady doing her PhD in nuclear biology or something like that. And I said, how many more years? I've been at this for 2 years. I have another 3 years. I said, wow, you picked a big mountain to climb. And she smiled. She said, but I like it. And then she said, but I know that's not it. Doing what I like and feeling, nicely challenged by that kind of a goal. I need the message of Bhagavad Gita to be inside me also. So, okay, that's a good goal. 2 good goals, put them together. So whatever it's on the academic side or your career side or whatever the other, social, interpersonal, et cetera, goals are fine. Take steps that are sustainable. And it's the good starting point for all of that is good japa. You have a second question, Abhinav?
No, this is it, Maharaj. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Shreya, want to unmute yourself?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful insight. And please accept my humble obeisances.
Hi, Krishna Shaya.
I have a question. So I find that I feel most stressed when I'm given a lot of options to choose, and I have to choose between these options, which can take me to different directions in life. And I find that after making a choice, I take too much time thinking, have I made the right choice? And live in the fear that I will regret the choice that I have made. So my question is, how would I decide which option is the right one? Or I guess to add on, is there a right option?
Nice question. Nice question. It's not, there's not a simple formula, but I just make a simple recommendation that it's not, that the execution is not necessarily so simple. So the simple recommendation is same as with Abhinav, chant good japa, do your spiritual practice in a qualitative way that will put you into a reflective place, a mode of goodness and spiritually energized place. That's first. If you can do that, then when you're contemplating what your options are, it's a standard practice. Yourself and or with persons that you feel are wise, you make a little brainstorm list. And then you don't edit the brainstorm list, you're just making a list. And then you eliminate some that are, less likely, but you don't have to do that editing to begin. Just make a list, eliminate some, then you have some remaining. And of the some remaining, you put them in writing in front of you. It's ideal. Put them in writing in front of you. And then which resonates most with me, and so that's subjective. And then those persons who I look to as spiritual guides in my life, is this going to align with them and the teachings that I received from them, not their personality, but the teachings that I received from them? Is this in alignment? So an alignment question. It's a subjective and an objective alignment question. And then at a certain point in time, there may be still some remaining that you can't really decide, but you can't just keep sitting on the fence. You have to decide. So then this is a recommendation. I wrote an essay about this maybe 15 years ago. You start moving along a certain direction, and you're always open. You remain open to Super Soul prompting you from within to say this wasn't the best of the choices you could have made. And then you're flexible because you're ready to go in a different direction, just want appropriate direction, but you have to move. You can't just stay on the fence. So you move with something that makes sense and resonates with persons that you feel comfortable receiving guidance from. And you move in that direction with a flexible mood. And if you're keeping your attention on pleasing Krishna, the Supreme, then you'll get some indicator, you'll get some help beyond yourself. And you practice at that, it becomes like, it happens much more quickly through practice than to what I just described. It's what I just described can sound a little mechanical, a little tedious, but you do it in principle, and it becomes your second nature, it becomes how you live your life. And if it wasn't the best choice, 2 years down the road, you shrug your shoulders and, here we are. Now, let me not lament over it wasn't the best of possible choices, but it was what it was. And now you have other choices and other options in front of you for other decisions, and you keep moving. Keep the like with Abhinav, keep the long-term goal in mind, and these shorter-term ones, they're not jugular. They're not going to make it or break it kind of things. Perfectionists become obsessive. and they can't move as quickly and as effectively as persons who are not just mediocre, but not that all decisions don't have to be perfect. There's a whole thing about this, which I won't go into at the time.
Thank you so much.
Stay in good association. Stay under the guidance of persons who are wise and they care about you. They're not interested in controlling and manipulating you, micromanaging you. They're just wise, and you keep their association. That's going to help you move in the right direction too. Anyone else? Maha, is there something in the chat box we need to pay attention to, or are we done?
Does not look like there's anything in the chat right now, so I think we're done.
Okay. So if the snowstorm is over, then likely I'll see you, or some of you at least, in person tomorrow.
Yes. So there's going to be the program in MVR tomorrow from 6 to 7:30. For those who are able and willing to make it, please join. And also thank you so much, Maharaj, for like coming and speaking to us.
I went a little fast because of time, but you're busy people and you can pick things up. A little slower is a little more my nature, just because it helps things sink in a little bit. But tomorrow evening, we won't have to go so fast because the presentation is a little shorter and tighter. So hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow.
That's good. Very well.
Haribol.
Recording and stop.